There's many, so let me talk about the higher priority ones. A key trend that we're seeing in the business is essentially the size of the business. The medical tech, medical device and diagnostics sector has grown to now well over $500 billion of global revenue, which is the second point. It's become a global business in the truest sense of the word. In addition to that, there are some underlying drivers which are making this a fairly important sector for all of us in humankind. And it is moved from just being a device that others can use to their clinical utility or aspirations, to a sector which the manufacturers, the sponsors themselves are thinking, what is the unmet medical need that my platform or device, because it could be something like a big imaging scanner, it could also be something as simple as a scalpel, but what does it do? And let me showcase the value of that with genuine clinical evidence so it gets used the right way. And we'll talk a lot more, I'm sure, in this conversation about that. Take those first 3 points as important. It brings up a fourth one. Regulators, the moment they hear something like this, go, hang on, if you're talking about clinical utility, we have a point of view about that. We have regulations and guidelines. So regulations have become more complex, both in country as well as globally. And most recently, the European changes that have come about because of digitization and global data rights and privacy, they are a significant force in this industry. And then lastly, and then again we can go into a different level of depth in a few minutes, we're also seeing that the whole wearables, consumerization, nearness to patients is also changing the way products in this space are designed and used. At some level, we're probably all wearing Apple Watches or some form of, at some level, we're all wearing a wearable that is gathering data. Seema, if I can make a personal reference, right? Sure. We had all read about the patient some years back who said, who was on record, I think Apple was promoting him, saying, one morning I woke up and I pressed that crown and it told me I had a cardiac arrhythmia, and I went to see my doc and turned out my life was saved. Well, that was the true positive. And Seema recently had a true negative. Where a false positive, actually, where she did the same thing and she was given the alarming, go do something. And then she brought in the appropriate healthcare professional, did the right tests. But why I wanted to start off with this is, wearables are giving us real-time data that we as consumers can look at and go, what am I going to do about this? In the case of cardiac arrhythmias, that's a pretty significant and serious thing. So the reaction is pretty obvious.
Absolutely.
Right? But
scary.
If you go from the sublime to the more mundane, wearables also reveal data that we can use to guide our lives in many ways. So whether it is, do I really have sleep apnea? Am I snoring? Can I get a better quality of basic life? Not just for a significant clinical disease through wearables. And then there are stages in between. We have been able to significantly expand the medical frontier by designing wearables to do things that we couldn't imagine doing just a few years back. And one of my favorite examples there is when a patient has a whole set of neuromuscular diseases ranging from MS at the beginning, so multiple sclerosis, which is just where the large axons have leakage of signals, so the ability to control large muscles, I use my hand, but typically it's legs, get affected. That's almost simpler. The more complex, the ones we almost all dread, are things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, degenerative diseases like that. Historically, when the patient came in with mild symptoms or family members saying, they couldn't have, Dad, you're not what you used to be, so we want to go see a neurologist, we ended up with a questionnaire-based way of diagnosing. And especially if the scores got worse, then you could say you're progressing, which was a complex thing for a pharma company developing a drug to say, how do I work with this fuzzy data to prove that I actually have helped? Why I took such a long wind-up was, in these neuromuscular degenerative diseases, we have developed a sensor. The sensor is something you can either keep in your pocket, attached to your chair. It measures, in this one very particular use case, it measures the difficulty someone has in just getting up from their chair. And it records the differences over time as that becomes a harder and harder action. Or its opposite, responsive therapy making it easier. So now we've got quantitation of something that was very hard to otherwise do because it's in the patient's everyday life. Then the pharma company is able to say to the FDA in the US case, guess what I've got, right? I've got the ability to give you hard data that gives you early evidence that my drug is working. I don't need to wait for 10 years to show the neurodegeneration that could have taken place didn't. There are over 3,000 known applications in the medical space today for wearables. And that number I'm sure is going to go even larger as time goes by.